He stood alone in a dying field, the wind howling through empty trees as he gripped his shovel with trembling hands. Caleb Simmons wasn't digging for gold, he was digging a grave. A grave for a nameless woman the world had already forgotten. A woman the sheriff said was cold, lifeless, gone. Just another lost soul on a dirt road no one remembered. And yet, as Caleb lowered his eyes and prepared to cover her with earth, she opened hers. That one blink stopped his heart. He should have buried her. He was paid to do it. But instead, that single glance pulled him into a storm darker than anything he'd ever known. Who was she? Why was she left for dead? And who was coming to silence her for good? This isn't just a story about survival. This is the story of a broken man and a buried woman who were never meant to meet. But when they did, the grave meant for her became a second chance for them both. Stay with me, because what happens next will shatter your soul. No one had spoken to Caleb Simmons in weeks. Not since the fire. Not since the last of his crops turned to ash, and the bank tacked that final notice on his cracked barn door. The once proud farmer was now a ghost among the same fields that had once fed his family, now barren and windswept. With hands calloused from years of labor and a heart broken from too many silent meals alone, Caleb had reached a place where purpose felt like a cruel memory. That morning, the knock on his door sounded like judgment. Sheriff Harlan stood there, hat in hand, eyes heavy. There's a body out by Dry Creek. No kin, no ID. Might be one of them travelers. We need someone to dig the grave. Count'll pay. Caleb stared at the sheriff, silent. He hadn't been offered work in months, and now they wanted him to bury the dead. He nodded, not because he wanted to, but because hunger had a way of silencing pride. Dry Creek was 10 miles west of nowhere. When Caleb arrived with a rusty shovel and a wheelbarrow full of regret, the wind howled like it knew what was coming. Beneath the crooked tree lay a body, covered in a worn wool blanket. Thin, frail, still, her small feet poked out from under the edge. Caleb hesitated. The sheriff had left hours ago, saying she died of cold alone. But something about her felt unfinished. He dug slowly, each clump of earth a memory of what he'd lost, his wife, his boy, the life that once lived inside this broken man. The hole grew wider, deeper. His fingers trembled against the wood of the shovel. When he wiped his brow, dirt streaked across his face like war paint. He didn't know why he kept looking at her, as if waiting for something, a sign, a blink of breath. The wind died. The world fell silent. Then it happened. Just as Caleb leaned down to move the blanket, her fingers twitched. He froze. The air thickened, time slowed, and for a moment, Caleb wondered if his mind had finally cracked. But then her eyelids fluttered, just once, and her lips parted as if whispering a name lost to the wind. Caleb dropped the shovel. It clanged against a rock, echoing like a gunshot across the empty land. She wasn't dead. She was breathing, shallow, barely there, but real. His first instinct was to run. His heart pounded in his chest like a wild drum. But he didn't. Instead, he knelt beside her, his trembling hand reaching out to brush her hair back. Her skin was ice, her face bruised and dirt-streaked, but her eyes, when they opened, were deep, haunting pools of fear and something else, recognition. "Help," she whispered, barely audible. "Please, don't let him find me." Caleb's world tilted. He looked around instinctively, as if someone was watching. "Who did this to you?" he asked, but she didn't respond. She closed her eyes again, a tear slipping down her cheek and disappearing into the dust. He couldn't leave her. He knew what the county would say, that she was good as dead, that he should have buried her and taken the money. But this wasn't about money anymore. This was about a woman clawing her way back from the edge of death. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt something stir inside him. Duty, maybe even redemption. He carried her, limp and whisper-light, back to his broken-down farmhouse. The journey felt endless. Every creak of the wheelbarrow, every groan of its rusted wheels, echoed his own pain. He laid her on the only bed left intact, covered her with every blanket he could find, and stoked the fire until it roared. She drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she whimpered. Other times she called out names. Emily, Jonas, Mama. Each name a clue. each tear a piece of a puzzle Caleb didn't understand yet. He fed her spoonfuls of warm broth, sat beside her through the night, and listened to the silence between her breaths. On the second night, during a thunderstorm that shook the windows, she grabbed his hand in her sleep and muttered, "He tried to bury me alive." Caleb stared at her, his throat tightening. That wasn't just fear in her voice. That was truth, cold and horrifying. Someone had wanted her dead. Someone still might. And now, Caleb had unknowingly become her shield. But who was she? And why had she been left to die near Dry Creek, miles from any town or road? Caleb searched her torn coat, found a small locket hidden inside. Inside it, a faded photo of a little girl and a woman, possibly her mother. No names, no dates, just shadows of a past, now hanging by a thread. By the third day, her color returned. She could sit up, speak in longer sentences. But whenever he asked who had hurt her, she'd shake her head, terrified. "If I tell you, he'll come for you too." Caleb didn't care. He'd already buried everything he once loved. If protecting this woman cost him his life, so be it. She had survived something monstrous. And somehow, her survival had reignited a flame in him he thought had burned out long ago. But neither of them knew that the man who thought she was buried and gone had already discovered her grave was empty, and he was coming back to finish what he started. The morning light crept through the broken window panes as Caleb sat in his old wooden chair, shotgun across his lap, eyes on the door. The woman, still a stranger in name but no longer in spirit, slept restlessly in his bed, wrapped in warmth and fear. Her words echoed in his mind. "He'll come for you too." Caleb didn't doubt it. There was a fire in her voice, the kind that only burns in those who've seen hell and clawed their way out. Just after sunrise, the wind shifted. Something was wrong. It was too quiet. No birdsong, no rustling trees, only the low groan of something foreign in the air. Caleb stood slowly, every instinct screaming. Then he saw it, a dust trail rising on the horizon, a black pickup truck tearing down the dirt path toward his farm, its tires kicking up gravel like a charging beast. He didn't need to ask. He knew it was him. Caleb turned to the woman, whose eyes were now wide open. "He's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Get under the floorboards," Caleb said quickly. Now, she didn't argue. She slid off the bed, wincing, still weak. He pulled the rug back, lifted the loose planks beneath it, and helped her down into the crawl space. She looked up at him, terrified. "Don't let him take me." "I won't," he promised, then closed the boards and replaced the rug. The truck skidded to a halt just outside. A door slammed. Heavy boots crushed gravel. Caleb stepped onto the porch, shotgun firm in his grip. A man approached, tall, clean-cut, cold eyes behind sunglasses. The kind of man who smiled without warmth. "Morning," the man said, his voice smooth but empty. "I'm looking for someone." Caleb said nothing. She might have passed through here. Dark hair, thin, quiet. Might be confused. Thought maybe you'd seen her. "What if I had?" Caleb asked, his voice low. The man shrugged. "Then I'd thank you kindly and take her off your hands. She's not well, you see. She hurts people, runs from things she don't understand." Caleb's jaw tightened. She didn't look like a threat when I found her half dead near Dry Creek. For the first time, the man's expression shifted. Subtle but deadly. "You made a mistake, friend. You should have buried her like you were paid to." The air snapped cold. Now Caleb knew. This man hadn't just wanted her gone. He had planned it, paid for it, expected her to vanish in silence. But fate had twisted the story. And now, Caleb stood between a monster and the woman he'd nearly buried. "I dug that grave," Caleb said, voice shaking with anger. But she opened her eyes. That was no accident. That was mercy. The man took a step forward. "Move aside." "I won't." A beat of silence passed between them. Then the man lunged. Caleb fired. The blast rang out across the field, ripping through the morning calm. The man fell back, hit in the shoulder, blood spraying across the porch. But he wasn't down. He scrambled, pulled a pistol from his belt, and fired blindly through the screen door. Caleb ducked, heart pounding, reloading with shaking hands. Inside, the woman crawled from the floorboards, ignoring her pain. She saw the blood on the floor, heard the chaos outside, and remembered the last time she had heard gunshots, how they echoed through the woods when he came for her the first time. She limped toward the back door, but the man, bleeding, furious, kicked open the front and stormed inside. Caleb swung the shotgun again, but the man knocked it from his hands. A brutal punch sent Caleb to the ground, dazed. The man grabbed the woman by the wrist. "You think hiding saved you? You think anyone will believe your lies?" But she didn't cower this time. She looked him straight in the eyes. "You tried to kill me. You buried me alive." The words hit harder than a bullet, and Caleb, gathering strength, reached for the fireplace poker. With one swift motion, he struck the man's leg, sending him reeling. The woman broke free. Caleb stood, blood running down his cheek, fists clenched. "You're not taking her." The man raised his pistol, but it was too late. She had grabbed the shotgun. Shaking, breath shallow, she pointed at him. "You should have made sure I was dead." He laughed. "You won't shoot me." She didn't blink. The blast knocked him back into the table, then to the floor. Silence returned, heavy and final. Caleb stood beside her, watching the man who had tried to erase her from the world now lie still and lifeless. The fire crackled in the hearth. She dropped the shotgun, her body trembling. "It's over," she whispered. But Caleb knew better. "No," he said softly. "It's just beginning." The authorities came 2 hours later. The woman gave them her name, Lena Morris. She told them everything. How she'd uncovered the crimes her wealthy fiancé had buried beneath his empire. How he'd tried to silence her forever. And how fate led her to a man who was meant to dig her grave, but instead gave her a second life. Caleb refused any reward. He didn't want money. He wanted land. Not for crops, but for healing. He turned his barren farm into a refuge, a home for people with nowhere to go. People like Lena. He built cabins, grew food, and started over with purpose burning in his heart again. And every evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Caleb would walk the edge of the old grave he once dug with shaking hands. The hole had long been filled in, not with death, but with the memory of a glance, one that changed everything. Because in that single moment, when her eyes opened and met his, he stopped being a man waiting for the end, and became a man who would fight for new beginnings. Weeks passed. The farm, once silent and decaying, slowly came back to life. Lena, though still healing, began tending to the garden Caleb had abandoned long ago. Her hands, once trembling from fear, now moved with quiet purpose, pulling weeds, planting seeds, watering roots. Caleb watched her from the porch, the same place he had once waited to die. Now he waited to live. They spoke little of what happened. Some pain needs no words, but in the stillness between their glances, in the shared silence of working side by side, there was understanding. Two souls, buried by life, had dug each other out. Lena often stared at the horizon, her face lined with thought. Caleb knew she was still haunted, but she no longer looked afraid. She looked forward. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from the district attorney. The man who had tried to kill her had been under federal investigation. Her survival, her testimony, had brought down an entire web of corruption. She wasn't just a victim. She had become the reason justice was finally served. Caleb read the letter aloud. When he finished, Lena smiled, not out of triumph, but closure. "Maybe now," she said softly, "I can stop running." Caleb nodded. "Maybe now we both can." The sun dipped below the fields, painting the sky with orange and crimson. Caleb walked out to the tree near Dry Creek, where it all began. He stood over the place he had dug her grave. The earth was soft now, blanketed in wildflowers she had planted weeks earlier. No marker, no cross, just life growing where death was meant to be. He knelt there, his hand pressed to the soil, remembering how close he had come to losing the one thing he didn't know he was still searching for meaning. When he looked up, Lena stood behind him. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his. "I should be dead," she whispered. "But you're not," he said, "and neither am I." Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but peace. The kind of peace that comes only after walking through fire and making it out the other side. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Caleb closed his eyes without feeling afraid of what tomorrow might bring. 2 broken lives, 2 empty graves, 1 glance that rewrote everything. He had dug her grave with shaking hands, believing he was burying a stranger. Instead, he uncovered the reason his own heart kept beating.